Good evening. This is the third in our series of Third Eye Talks. We call them Third Eye Talks because by the end of it, we're hoping that you're going to have a little bit of an awakening, a little bit of an opening of your third eye, and then you might even take life in a more exciting and interesting direction once you've left here. And the first one we did was on the third eye itself, where we looked at the pineal gland as the origin and source of so much of illumination and across religions and across cultures, that the third eye was this part of the brain that could be activated. And then the second talk, we talked about the Kundalini, where we talked about how one can awaken that in your spinal cord and then open your third eye through breathing and mantra and techniques like that. And today we're coming to the source of it all, because to understand Shiva is to understand consciousness. And, I love the mythology and I love the tradition and I love the religion, but I want to look at it a little bit with you as an explorer today. I'm going to look at who was this Shiva, what is this archetype that we are so obsessed with? Why does it keep going? Why has it been around for thousands of years? This fascinates me because there's something there that defies Vedic religions, that defies new ideas and new religions. He keeps coming back to life over and over again with each generation. And in fact, every generation seems to fall more in love with him because he's got that appeal, that strength, that fearlessness, as you called it, that beautiful way of being. So before I start, I want to tell you a little story. And you mentioned it in passing, but it's a very interesting story because it puts Shiva in a context for us. Vishnu was sleeping on his beautiful infinite sea, and out of his navel arose a lotus, and in that lotus was Brahma. So Brahma was Vishnu's son, in a way. He came out of Vishnu, and when he came out of Vishnu, he was trying to get out of the lotus, and he couldn't find a way out. Right? And he tried everything. He tried to climb out. He couldn't do it. So then he realized that if he meditated, maybe he could come down and become one with Vishnu. So he sat there in tapas for 12 infinite years of Brahma, which is nothing compared to Shiva, but we'll come to that. And then he came and he found himself sitting next to Vishnu. And he challenged Vishnu. And Vishnu says, "You've come out of me. Who are you? You're Brahma. You've come out of me." And he says, "No, I am equal to you. I am the creator. I am equal to you." And Vishnu says, No, I am the preserver. I am the greater of both of us. I am your father. And a huge cosmic battle started. We're talking about a serious UFO-type battle of two ultra extraordinary gods went into battle. And they fought night and day. They attacked each other with lasers and missiles and who knows what they did. And they devastated each other. And by the time they were done, suddenly, a very strange thing happened. A beam of light appeared. Boom! Just suddenly appeared. Infinite beam of light with no end above and no end below. It was just amazing. This is just a mild version of that. And the image was one of fire and galactic swirling in the middle of the beam. If you read the Shiva Purana, it describes it as galaxies swirling, worlds cascading into this beam of light. And both of them stared at this beam of light, and all battles stopped. And they thought about it, and they said, "Let us see if we can find the bottom and the top. Brahma, you go to the top, and I'll go to the bottom, and we'll look for the ends." And neither of them could find it. But Brahma, very clever fellow, he goes up, and he finds these flowers drizzling down that talk of this infinite being called Shiva. And he says, there's this infinite being, and the flowers come. So he persuades the flowers to come down and tell Vishnu that he found the top. And he comes down. Right? Brahma, by the way, if you read all the Puranas, is the cheeky liar who causes all the problems in all the great battles between the gods. Brahma is always the troublemaker. So he gets down, and he comes down, and Vishnu says, Vishnu says, "I couldn't find it." And Brahma says, yes, I found it. It was the top. And suddenly, out of that comes this fellow, boom. And out of the beam of light comes Rudra, right? The fierce Rudra. And he is Shiva. And he comes out and he says, neither of you know what it is. I am this infinite being. I am the source of all this being. And they both bow down and they worship him and they realize. And what he does is that he comes out and he's so fiery and so full of energy of the universe and the galaxy that they have no idea what to do, so they just bow down. But Brahma, for having lied, is told that, that he was going to lose his powers. And he says, because of that, you will not be worshipped anymore, because of this. And by the way, this all happened in Arunachala. This mountain is another mountain of Shiva. We have Kailash in the north, but Arunachala is one of the holiest mountains in India, right? So if you look at it, what is it about a mountain? If you go inside the Arunachala tombs, these are not that old, these are about 1,000 years old, but they seem to date back much further, right, into antiquity. They don't even know when. If you look at it, you'll see that there is a deep recess with a linga, a stone in the middle of it. And this stone is got the Rudra, the Shiva, inside it. And it is a curved stone, right? It is, in this case, it is not like a penis, but it is a curved object which represents infinite space, the beam of light. So most of the lingas we find in mythology come from this idea of that something about the infinite nature of consciousness, of space, of the universe we're dealing with here. So that was the first clue we get about Shiva in the Shiva. In fact, this is the first story in the Shiva Puranas, right? And the Shiva Puranas are amalgamations of stories and mythologies brought out during the Sanskrit age to explain these old-time religions that were around, that were being around at that time. I wanted to quickly show you this. This is the current thinking in physics about the creation of the cosmos, about the creation of the universe, right? The earlier theory was that we had this huge Big Bang, and from that Big Bang emanated everything that would one day become all of us and the particles and the things of things. Physics is moving in a slightly different direction now. Physics is moving in the direction of what they call a quantum fluctuation. They believe that there are multiple universes coming into being all the time, and at some level, a quantum fluctuation occurs at very small particle level, and that cascades into creating particles and waves that become universes. So if you can imagine, the blink of an eye of Brahma here cascades into a period, and then galaxies start forming, and before you know it, we have matter and material. So at some point, at this point here, an Indian could argue that there's a pinpoint, a point of super consciousness, of consciousness that doesn't seem to exist anywhere else. It's just in a point. It's like, it's not even a big bang, it's just going outward from that point. So this point, in a lot of, in the tantric schools, it's called Hrim or Shrim. Shrim for the goddess, Rim for Shiva. Rim means the point exploding, and Shrim means imploding into the point, right? So when we do that, we come to see that, think of it that this is our solar system forming. What a violent start each galaxy, each thing has, each solar system, each star system. We have explosions, we have black holes, we have cascading galaxies, we have planets hitting each other, asteroids, comets, you name it. It's like a fearful dance of the gods of heaven. They're dancing away, 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 away. And when you look at it, this is the Earth forming, the asteroids hit the early planets and caused collisions, broke off into moons, and all kinds of things happen. And when you go further, you find that in Earth as well, until recently, in fact, for some reason, for a few thousand years, we have been lucky. We have not been hit by asteroids and comets and meteorites on a regular basis. This was a natural part of geology on the Earth. For thousands of years, even our early ancestors would have seen flying objects all the time coming and hitting them. And when you look further, you find that the Earth itself is continuously going through transition and change. It is a rumbling roar. It is volcanic right under us at this very moment. There is volcanic energy rumbling. We can't hear it. We don't know it. We don't sense it. We have a feeling, but we're sitting in air-conditioned IIC, and what do we know about the earth? What do we know about how it feels? When we start this sense of awe about things, we start to come to this idea of Shiva. So I'm coming at Shiva first from the point of view of consciousness, which is a fascinating way to approach it, because if I start from the God and work back towards consciousness, that's a mythological approach. But if I look at the wonder and amazement of what it is to be human today, or at any time in the history of humanity, how can we not create a Shiva? This is the question I have. We have to have a Shiva, because whatever we are in awe of, whatever we are blown away by, whatever frightens the hell out of us, whatever gives us strength, whatever is terrifying yet awesomely beautiful to look at, these are the Shivas. These are Shivas. This is what Shiva means. It is that amazing super reality, the auspicious one, Shiva, right? That means anything that gives us an auspicious sense. So you can imagine that I could have a rock in my village and tomorrow it is a Shiva Lingam, right? And we declare it a Shiva Lingam and we start worshipping, and that becomes a Shiva Lingam. So we can find in nature anything we want. And some of the earliest forms found that were these round stones. And we see them throughout the Indian subcontinent. We see them in the art. We see them everywhere, right? And this fascination with round objects, and these were found normally in rivers or at sources of rivers or near volcanoes. You find these beautiful round rocks, right? Some may have been of alien origin. They may have been cometary. They may have been powerful magnetic rocks that came. But there was a fascination with round rocks. And in fact, this structure of megalithic worship is worldwide. From Stonehenge to India, it doesn't matter. We were fascinated by these vertical, rounded objects that we could worship in some way. In India, we find the serpent. And with the serpent, what happens is that the serpent seems to be a metaphor for something deeper about human consciousness. It is about cycles of time. It is about secret information, secret knowledge. When you feel that you are discovering something secret in you, a serpent is awakening. This is from Indus Valley, right? A linga about 3000 to 2500 BC. So we have been looking at lingas for a very long time. This is linga worship from 1st century Mathura. Right? This is linga worship. And as you can see, by the 1st century, it is becoming more and more like a male phallus. It is becoming a male phallus. Right? In fact, the oldest linga found is this one, which is in the village of Gudimalam in Andhra Pradesh, which is actually a very large phallus with a Shiva standing on it, coming out of it, a Rudra. It's actually Rudra always coming out of it. I want to tell you a little story about this, because in the Shiva Puranas, one story is that lingas came out of that pillar of light. Right? The other story, which is a little bit more A-rated, forgive me, is, and because the Shiva Puranas are very graphic, if you ever read them, you will find that yourself, the translations, that the Brahmans, the Vedic people were worshipping Shiva, and the Brahmans, and they were worshipping Shiva in a town, I think in North India, Ramgarh. Is there a place called Ramgarh? Yes, Ramgarh. In Ramgarh, near the forest, famous place now because of the linga there, they were worshipping Shiva, all the Brahmins, and he was very pleased with their, he's a very easily pleased God. He comes and says, oh, thank you, he's very happy. He came down, and the time he came, the Brahmins all went to collect wood from the forest, and they left their wives in the village. So he walks in, right, as this ramshackle, ash-covered madman, right? Completely naked with an erect phallus. And he is dancing for them. He's dancing away. In fact, there are great paintings of him dancing away for them, gyrating his hips and doing, and at first it's like, oh ma, no, 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 don't do this. And then they got excited. And everybody starts dancing with him. And the Brahmins come back and they see their wives dancing with this strange man from the forest, right? And they curse him and they say, may your phallus, your linga fall off right now, right? And it is fully erect and it falls off. And it falls off, but because it is Shiva's phallus, it is burning hot with fire, going through the three worlds. It goes through heaven, it goes through the mind, it goes through human beings, the earth. It is damaging everything and nothing can stop it, right? So finally, they go to Brahma and say, Brahma, what do we do? And Brahma says, no, 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 not to worry. Go to Uma, Parvati, Devi, Durga, Uma, and ask her to put a pail of water underneath it in a cup of a lotus, right? And they put the water underneath it, and boom, the penis lands on it and it stops. And it finds its home on the yoni of Parvati. Right? And from that point on, we get the yoni and linga together. So this is the great Shiva Purana story. So if you ever get a chance, I promise you, read the Shiva Puranas. And don't worry about Sanskrit, there's some good translation. I have one here by Rajesh Menon, worth reading. Fascinating stuff, you know. And so what we find is that the image by the 1st century, remember, this is 400 years after Buddha. This is 500 years after the Upanishads, or 800 years after the Upanishads start. So we're starting to see a movement towards the Shiva culture, you know, revival. But we go further back. These are lingas found from the 1st century. This is Mathura, this is Allahabad, and again Mathura. Mathura had a lot of activity in the early century. So in the stories of the Shiva Puranas, and we get this story that where the cascading penis dropped, right, the phallus, Jyoti Linga is formed. And each Jyoti Linga has a story of its own, right? So you have, you know, the story of Somnath, you have the story of, and there are 12 major Jyoti Lingas in India. So if you look at it carefully, you'll see that it is a sacred map of almost all of India, as you were saying in your words earlier. From Kedarnath up there, to Kashi, to Rameshwaram, to Somnath, and you see them all there. And each one has a story. So what are the stories like? Most of the stories are that the gods and the Vedic people are having problems. They cannot solve them. Brahmas and Vishnus and in the Shiva Puranas, you never find that the Indras are gods. They are guardians. They are never called God. They're just devas, a minor level of energy. Vishnu and Brahma are out of the ribs, out of the heart, and out of the body of Shiva. They come out of the body. And out of the heart comes Rudra, the living manifestation of Shiva. So what is Shiva? Shiva is both formless and with form. Formless with form. So he is both the energy and the consciousness of the whole universe, and it comes as a linga, and he is also Rudra, all the different avatars of his form, and he is a living being in the world as well. So we see he is the only god in the Indian pantheon that is both. And in fact, the Upanishads is the only other teaching that goes with that idea of the formless, the Advait, what they call, which is that Brahman. So Shiva, at Sadashiva, is actually Brahman, at that supreme level, you know, at that supreme level. So look at this map here. It's a fascinating map. Most of them seem to be in the Maharashtra, Gujarat area there. And we have very few in Bengal. And in fact, I have another map that shows that all the Shakti Pitas, the goddess worshipping sects, are all on the eastern side of India here. Right? So it seems to be, and we're working on this thesis, we haven't proved it yet, I'm working on it, that the India got divided between east and west of goddess worship and west of male god worship, which is similar to the Kundalini idea of Ida and Pingala, right? Of Ida and Pingala. So these are the different centers, and if you ever get a chance, I've seen a couple of them, they're worth going to because they are huge energy places. If you ever go inside the Jyotirlinga, and even the non-Jyotirlingas like Pashupati in Nepal or places like that, the energy is palpable. You walk in and you will get hallucination, you will get goosebumps, your hair will stand on end, you will start feeling vibration. And if you go in at a particular time of the day when they're doing particular artis, it is electric. I believe, and I want to see it, that in Benares, there is an arti in the evening that happens at the 14th day of the moon, or 13th and 14th day of the moon, which is almost sending a beam of light up to heaven, and they practice in a particular way, and the Prajapatis do it. So we're talking about a religion based on energy, pure consciousness and energy, and that's what I'm talking about. So we go from linga, right? Consciousness, linga, this awesome energy of the world, of creation, of the universe. But we also have this human form. And the human form is fascinating because he is an outsider. He is not your son-in-law you want. He is not your friend. He is not the boy you bring home from school to meet your mother. This is not the guy you want, okay? Shiva is not that person. Shiva is an outsider. He covers himself in ash. He wears loincloth of tiger skin. He sits on tiger skin. He has matted hair in japa. He has a whole serpent on his neck. He's as frightening as they come. You wouldn't want him near. Even in the Pashupati pictures you see are like mad shaman dancing. Like a mad animal with antlers on his head. You see these pictures of the shamans. And in fact, if you look carefully, just one thing, before I go there, that wherever you see the sitting Shiva, he is actually sitting in deep state of meditation. And this is fascinating because he represents absolute stillness. And the finest point they could find in India for that absolute stillness was Kailash. And Kailash today is the holiest mountain in India for Shiva. I've not been yet, but I plan to go. And here, it is still believed that at the end of the Puranas, this is where Shiva and Parvati still live, inside there. Right? They believe that. But it's also a huge energy place. So all the Shaivites believe that if you go to Kailash Mansarovar, and there's always a lake next to the mountain. In Arunachal, you have the lake next to the mountain. Same thing, you'll always find a lake next to the mountain. The spirits go up and down from the other dimensions from that place. So you have it in Prayag, you have it in Bodh Gaya, you have it in different places around India. These are high energy places. So if you do not believe in God, and you do not believe in, go for the experience of the energy. You will hallucinate without knowing why. You will have a better trip than any drug can give you. It is a fact. So try it out. Go and see these places. In fact, one of the duties of all good Hindus, if you practice Shaivism, is to go to these places before you die, so that you experience it. At least then you know what you're going towards, and it's okay. It's not that bad. You see the infinite. So I want to take us back a little further now. In Madhya Pradesh, they found these caves with our own Stone Age caves, right, in India, in a place called Bhimbetka. And there's this amazing cave structure there, full of cave art, right? Some of it dating back to 10,000 BC, 10,000 BC, right? So we're talking Stone Age. And in that, they found, you can vaguely see it, a trident-carrying man, almost like a god, with a face, body, legs, hands gyrating, locks gyrating, and maybe he's got horns, we're not sure. But this is from at least 3000 BC. Right? So we already had an archetype of a Shiva man from then, from 3000 BC. Of course, these are legendary. This is from Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. We found coins. These are tokens, coins, tiny little things, this small, used in trading. Now, Many have argued this could be kings, but the similarities to Shiva are too strong. You know, the sitting in the royal throne pose in yoga, the Pashupati horns, the nature of the beasts around him, the Lord of the beasts, you know, it's too clear. It's too clear. So Shiva emerges into modern, you know, I'm quite fascinated today because if you look at Shiva through the ages, Shiva is drawn as a very delicate man in the early paintings, you know, very delicate, soft, right? In the South India, he's almost effeminate. You know, he's almost like curved and, you know, dancing and very gentle. And now we have Hrithik, Roshan as Shiva. You know, it's like a six-pack, you know, muscle bound, you know. So I think Shiva also changes with each generation how he looks. So I think that's fascinating. But Shiva is, one thing we find with Shiva is that even though he's sitting in isolation on Kailash, he has deep compassion. So anybody comes to him, he will give you a boon. He will open his eyes and welcome you and give you a blessing, give you a boon. But you have to do heavy penance. You know, you have to sit there and meditate for years, and then he'll open for you. You know, and what we found is that part of that compassion, which comes into blossom later and is part of the mythology of Shiva, is that at some point in the ancient thinking, we realized that Shiva and Shakti have to work together. The male and the female energy have to come together within each individual person. This is what we've been talking about with Kundalini in my other talks and things like that, which is that the Shiva and Shakti have to unite in order for you to have a unifying experience of the one, of that one truth, of that one nature. Right? So, this is a picture of the Valley of Flowers, one of the most sacred places in India. Right? And in fact, if you walk through the Valley of Flowers in certain days of spring or autumn, you will get intoxicated with the smell. You know, this is, all the sadhus are up there getting intoxicated, right? And part of Shiva worship is to be fully conscious but fully intoxicated, you know, in some way, if it's possible. And that's one of the things about Shiva. You want to be that. So Shakti, nature, mother, come into being at certain points in this story. And we find them in the mythology with Shiva was married twice. Well, married is not the word. The first relationship was with Sati. Has everybody heard of Sati? Yes? Yeah. Sati was also called Shiva, which is not just Shiva, but Shiva. In a way. And she was the daughter of Daksh. And this is a political storytelling now of that time. Okay, a little bit of politics now. So Daksh was a Vedic practitioner. He was a believer in the Vedas. He had regular homas. He had Indra, Vayu, Agni all being with him. Vishnu and Brahma were his regular guests. You know, the Vishwamitra built his palaces. He was a perfect, good Vedic man, right, king. But he was the father of a lot he's like the Noah of India. He was the first father, like Manu in a way. He was a father of humanity. And he did tapas to the goddess Durga and got the boon to have a daughter, but with the plan in his mind that he and Brahma had come up with, that would marry Shiva, right? And they would have, you know, then, because they wanted Shiva to participate in the world, because he was too distant, he was too remote, he was not involved. They wanted him to participate. So, and Shiva also felt that in his compassion for humanity, that he should be more involved. Right? He wanted to be more involved. So when they came to him and proposed, he was said, yeah, but who can hold my seed? You know, I am Shiva. You know, I will burn worlds. I will destroy worlds. You know, so they said only Durga, coming reincarnated as a woman, can take your seed. And so Durga comes into being as Daksh's daughter, Sati. And that she comes into being, and they have this wonderful love affair. In fact, the number, if you calculate it, is that they made love for 24 million years. You know, that's a long time. So we're talking about eons and eons of time here, okay? We're talking about eons and eons of time here. And as you can see, you know, quite happy dancing going on, you know, and love, lots of love. But Daksh was He was not a very good man. He was not a very good man. He is your pran villain of a film, you know. He's the villain. He's our villain, okay? He is our villain for sure. And he comes to, you know, now that his daughter has married this ragamuffin god that he doesn't like very much because he doesn't wear gold jewelry and he doesn't come to parties and he's not a very nice guy. You know, she marries this guy and he comes to him and they meet at Prayag in Allahabad at the Sangam, and they meet, and Shiva does not get up when he comes in. So he feels humiliated. So he says, how dare you not get up? I am Daksh, you know. And he says, all of you are banned from all Vedic homas. Get out. Right? So he threw Shiva and all his ganas out. Right? Now that was a huge insult to Shiva. So Shiva said, no, I'm in love with Sati. I'm dancing the blissful dance. I'm not going to fight. I'm going up to the Himalayas. He went up to Kailash with his wife. And he went there. And they were happily enjoying life there, away from Daksh. But Daksh, Daksh said, no, I'm going to throw a yagya. I'm going to throw a great sacrifice, a horse sacrifice, a Vedic sacrifice. And I'm not going to invite Shiva, just purposely. Right? And of course, Sati found out. And Sati wanted to go to her father's thing. And Shiva said, don't. But she said, no, you know, I must go. Right? And they fought. And he went. And Shiva did not agree, but he did not go. He said, I'm not going. And she gets there, and Daksh insults her and says, how dare you come to this event? Go away. Right? And in humiliation, she turns her kundali in herself, she raises her vayu, she lights the agni inside herself, and she burns herself up, right there and then. Right? The inner sati occurs, the inner burning occurs. And Shiva hears of this, and he sends the worst aspect of himself, which is Veerbhavra. So most of the pictures of Shiva we see are not Shiva himself, but his aspect coming through a gana, you know. And he sends Kali as well, and he sends them both, and he says, destroy everybody. That means I don't want, the actual utterance in the Shiva Purana is destroy every mantra. That means the entire Vedic knowledge should be destroyed. He utters that. Go and destroy it. So he comes and you know, they start attacking, and there's this huge battle. The Devas can't do it. The Devas are there, all the Brahmins are there, the Indras are there, all of them are there. Nobody can fight. And finally, you know, they finally crush everybody, and they've got, there is Daksh waiting to be killed, and he cuts his head off. Right? He cuts his head off. And this he dances the Tandav, right? Shiva dances the Tandav. This is the first time he dances the Tandav. This is the first time. The destroyer of worlds. And he picks up the dead body of Sati, right? And in this dead body holding in his hands, he's weeping and he's dancing this Tandav and swirling, and galaxies are being destroyed, planets are being destroyed, the whole thing is being destroyed. So Vishnu calms him down, and Vishnu is always the calmer downer of things. And he sends his Sudarshan Kriya and his chakra, and he cuts Sati up into 52 pieces, they say in the book, 52 pieces, right? And she falls. And when she falls, she forms the sacred geography of Shakti Peeths of India. So if you've ever seen a Shakti Peeth, there are 52 of them, and that's where Sati fell down. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because it defines, two things define the sacred geography of India. One is the Shiva Lingas, the Jyoti Lingas, and the other is the Shakti Peethas. Wherever Sati fell, her feet fell here, her yoni fell in Assam, her heart, her hands fell in different places. Everywhere she fell, there's a temple and a pilgrimage place and a linga everywhere you go. So if you want to see an India before there was an India, you need to go back to the Shiva Shakti religion of India, and you'll see a comprehensive map of India that even goes as far as Afghanistan, as far as Pakistan, you know, which is not about Hinduism. It is about a sacred energy that they map together, you know. And that's the power of it. All these places, Shakti Pitas as well, by the way, are energy places. That means you go, you meditate, Tara Pit, anywhere. There's one here in Chhatarpur. Go and see it. Sit in it, right? And I promise you, if you do any Devi worship or any Om Namah Shivaya for a little while, energy will start flowing in you, and you will wonder what's going on, you know. It's quite hypnotic. It's something else, you know. It's worth seeing. Okay. So this is the great stories of Shiva. So I'm not going to go into the stories today. I'm going, you know, I could tell you stories till we go all night, but I'm not going to tell you stories. I'm going to go back to this idea of consciousness. And so Shiva, the reason I want to talk about Shiva in that story is that when Shiva ends his anger, instead of destroying the world and coming back, he locks himself away. He goes to Kailash and he goes into such a deep meditation that nobody can touch him. Right? And this is the beginning of yoga. This is the ultimate dhyan, the concentration, you know. And this is where yoga, the story of yoga begins, right? But the gods have their games to play, right? Always. And so Brahma, he is the naughtiest of them all. You see, he had not forgotten the pillar of light incident. He had not forgotten the Daksha court incident. In Daksha court, something had happened to Brahma in Daksha's court. He had, it's a very funny story, but he had seen Sati's face, right? And like any stupid male, he let loose. And 4 drops he couldn't control fell from him, of his seed. And those 4 became the 4 lakes we know, 4 Pushkar lakes of Pushkar and all those lakes in India. So Brahma was very upset by all this, and he wanted to take revenge on Shiva. So he said, I'm going to seduce Shiva to give up his tapas, to give up his dhyan, you know. And so he got Kama involved in a whole thing. First of all, he went to Menu and Himachal and told them, please, you know, have a child. And they all worshipped and they prayed and they had a child. And Parvati was born. And in fact, she was called Uma. And in the Shiva Puranas, it says that her name was Uma because every time her mother would get angry with her, she'd say, Uma! So she became Uma, you know. And you know, in the southern tradition, Parvati becomes very interesting later, right? Very interesting in the southern tradition. But Parvati was Sati reincarnated, right? Because only Sati could, Durga or Sati could come and heal, and Shiva was not going to be moved. I shall not be moved. I do not want to be with humanity anymore. I don't want to do anything anymore. I'm just going to sit here, and I don't care if the worlds disappear. I'm in dhyan. I'm gone. But they had other plans for him. And Kama, who is the god of love, came with his arrow and was persuaded by Brahma, go on, shoot it to him, shoot it to him. If nothing will happen. And this is the first time in the Puranas that Shiva opens his third eye and in anger lets loose a bolt of laser fire and burns Kama to ashes right there as the arrow is coming towards him of love, you know. And so all the gods come and appease him, and Shiva finally says, okay, I'll bring Kama back to life. And he brings him back to life. And he accepts Parvati's worship, devotion, for years and years of meditation he had done, sitting next to him without moving at Kailash. He sat meditating on him. And she accepts him. And then a new love story begins. But this love story is different, because this love story is more modern. It's more like our modern day stories of films and television. It is a romantic story of a man and a woman and a family. And as you talked about it was a family man. And you can see that India is settling down. Civilizations are city-based now. They need family. They need a whole culture of family. And you get this family life starting. And Shiva has 2 children, right? Kartikeya and Ganesh, right? Kartik is the firstborn, and he is born to fight against a great demon, Asura demon, they call him a demon, but it's Asura, a different tribal person, called Taraka. And they brought him to come to that, and he had the stick, the veil. And today, if you go to South India, anywhere around the Siddha tradition or the Nyayamaya tradition, any of those traditions, Murugan is the god we worship. And Murugan is, you hear the chanting of the Siddha Shaivis and you understand what they're talking about. They go veil, 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 like that. It's like a non-stop call of this, pulsating. And Kartikeya was a symbolic birth because Shiva, Nama, Shivaya are the 5 elements, 4 elements and the 5th one being Om, right, the 5 elements. The 5th one being ether and then the 6th one being transcendental consciousness, Om, right. And when you look at that, the title of Kartikeya is the one of the 6th element. He is the 6th element and he's considered that. So he was Shiva manifest in the world. That's why he's worshipped in India as Murugan, as Skandhya, as he is the patron saint of the Nath Sampadaya. He is the patron saint of Gorakshanath and all of those guys. Anybody who follows Kriya Yoga comes from that Sampadaya, from that knowledge, of South. A very strong school of Siddha, Kundalini school, very strong, very similar to Shaivism of Kashmir, very similar. And this is the other son, is Ganesh, and there are many stories to Ganesh's birth, but basically he is a product of Parvati's own dirt coming off her body, forming into a gana. She makes her own gana to protect herself so that when she is bathing, nobody will disturb her. And she makes this young man who is this perfect young man, and he stands guard outside, but he doesn't know his own father, who is Shiva, and he challenges him, right? And Shiva tries everything to destroy him, but can't because he's so strong. And then finally he cuts off his head. And when he realizes it's his own son, he then sends them and they find the white elephant with a single tusk head to put on him. And they bring it, and the first animal they found, and they put it on him. The story is metaphorical. What it means is that there are 2 things elephants do very well. One is wisdom at the beginning of all ventures of starting, and the other is to move through things without stopping. They never stop a venture once they start one. They are goers. They keep going as a group. And that elephant gives you that strength in your life. So when you worship Ganesh, you are worshipping the wisdom innate inside you. You are worshipping the strength in you to go forward. And you're worshipping that elephant way of being, which is to, and that's beautiful. It's beautiful. So what are the symbols of Shiva, right? These are all metaphors. I'm sure that there was a reason why they physically had them also, practical things. But to us today, these are symbols. They are symbols for us to meditate on, right? So the Dhamru and the Trishul, the Dhamru is the pulse of time, of the Mahakala, of the time, of the universe coming into being and expanding and spreading. Tam. It's Nataraja. It is a tal, that tal, 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 tal. That continuous beat of the earth vibrating, of volcanoes, of all that stuff. It is, and the Trishul is, in one school of thought, it is the piercing of the 3 worlds, which is, it could be the 3 worlds of earth, ancestors and mind, and mind, or heaven, or it could be the 3 worlds of being Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. It could be the 3 worlds of Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha. These 3 worlds were thought of as the 3 distinct areas of the body, and the Trishul goes through them. But if you look at the Trishul, the design of the Trishul, and this has been agreed upon by most scholars, it is what we call in Kundalini the Shushumna with the Ida and Pingala on either side. That means that Ida is the sacred feminine, Pingala is Shiva, and through the middle you go Shushumna, up the Shushumna to the head with the serpents above your head, and Shiva and Shakti merge and you become one with the cosmos, with Shiva, with ultimate, Sadashiva, with the ultimate Shiva. The serpent is Vasuki, and Vasuki is 2 purposes of Vasuki. One is that he is the listener to everything that Shiva says. That means that he is the one who comes. In fact, in the ancient yogic teachings, Patanjali is called Vasuki. He is also called the serpent, because he is considered to be the one who sat next to Shiva and learned yoga, and then brought it to mankind. Right? So Vasuki is there. Vasuki is also the symbol of the Kundalini, which is the rising of this energy through you that lifts you up and opens your third eye and then takes you to the other dimension. Right? And Shiva is the god sitting there waiting for you to do that, waiting to take you there. The Rudraksha, when the Samudra Manthan occurred, when the churning of the Milky Way occurred, here was the churning of the Milky Way, and Shiva felt immense compassion, and he said in his words that when a teardrop falls from me, it becomes a Rudraksha tree. Right? So Rudraksha plant, Rudraksha tree are Shiva's tears for mankind. So when we weigh them and worship with them, we are worshipping him in that way. That is the myth of that. Nandi is a very interesting story because there are many things. He's the Gana riding bull, he's all that. But really speaking, the meditational metaphor is that if you see a bull sitting, they do not move. They sit completely still. They're looking at one thing. Maybe they're chewing the cud, but they're just looking. That means that they're waiting for the boons and blessings of Shiva without any expectations, without any, please give me more material gain, please give me power, please give me this, please give me that. The Nandi sits and just meditates with Shiva, on Shiva. I love you. There's no need, there's no desire. That's one of the good metaphorical meetings. The moon has been interpreted as that, in the practical sense, it's the 13th night and 14th night of that particular month of Shivratri is the most auspicious day of that crescent moon. And on that day is when you can tap into the Shiva energy. If you fast, you get all boons are given to you on Shivratri. But on any of those days, that crescent moon represents another thing altogether, which is Soma Rasa, and the idea of the plant energy giving us knowledge so that we can also become Shiva. So the moon represents Soma, the moon represents Shakti, which is the sacred feminine energy on the left side of our body, of the heart, of this side. Ida, all this side, all here, and it represents that. So when you think of the moon, so I want you to think of each thing as a meditation almost next time you're looking at it. Right? The Ganga at the top is an interesting story because in the mythology, the Ganga is the Milky Way, is the moving milk of the Milky Way swirling, coming into mankind to bless it, to save it, and to become Amrit later. And then it comes, in order to arrive on earth, it had to come through Shiva's locks, because only Shiva could support it and carry it. He is the only, in that way. And when it arrived there, she thought she was coming to do her own thing, and then Shiva kept her trapped there for 10,000 years. And then he let her out, And this is the story of ego. So Shiva on the three worlds is the destroyer of ego, of ahamkar, and of maya. The three things, me, maya, and this idea of something I want. These three things he's the destroyer of. So the Trishul, Shiva, the third eye are all about destroying these things. And the third eye, which is the most important one, is the Agya Chakra, this area here. Sadanama, here. Where by meditating on that, we open an inner eye. And that inner eye is what worshipping Shiva is all about. Supreme consciousness, supreme ultimate reality. Who am I? I am that cosmos dancing. I am Nataraja. I am the galaxies. I am you. I am the quantum particles. I am everything is through that point. This is the Ida and Pingala I was talking about. The left and the right. On the right side is Shiva. On the left side is Shakti. On the right is Shakti, and she comes down the left side. And on the right brain is Shiva, and he comes down the right side. So on the neuroscience of it all, it is bringing the two sides of your brain together on the limbic region with the reptilian mind in action with the pineal gland, and boom, a fusion occurs. We stop our minds and we become awake. And that third eye opens. And I've been talking about that in previous talks, and I'll take questions on that later. But this is the Samudra Manthan. This is the churning of the Milky Way. There are two meanings to this story. One is that this is you know, this is the first time in the history of the Puranas or anywhere where the Devas and the Asuras actually collaborated. They actually worked together to churn that thing. Of course, the Devas lied to the Asuras later and stole the Amrit. But at first, they all worked together, you know. So what it says is two things. One is that it is about preparing something, a higher state of consciousness, right? That when you churn together, metaphorically you're bringing a higher state of consciousness, but as you rise up, poisons will come. Your ego, your past, your problems, all those things. And only Shiva can drink that. Only Shiva can take that away from you. Only Shiva can remove your fear. So Shiva drinks all that and says, no, don't worry, have the Amrit. So once you get past this point in the Kundalini, right, you're in Shiva land. You're off. You're off to higher planes of consciousness. And that's what it means, right? The Nilkant means here. At this Visuddha, I am going forward. And if you see there, this lovely, I like this painting, modern, new artists are working on it. It becomes a blue neck at this point. We have the Shiva and the Shakti in us. And unless we reconcile the two parts of ourselves, we will never have alignment, which is yoga, and be whole, which is complete Kundalini. We can never have that unless we realize the two parts of ourselves. So without Shiva, there is no Shakti. Without Shakti, there is no Shiva. So Shiva can exist in total consciousness and bliss, but without Shakti activating it, you cannot have worlds, you cannot have procreation, you cannot have karma and seduction, you cannot have all of those things. And then, of course, there's Nataraja, which we both ending on. The Nataraja, this goes back to the first thing I was talking about, which is the principle that everything in the galaxy, in the universe is in motion. It's all moving. It's all energy. It is Brahman. It is Om. It is the primal sound inside you. It is roaring, right? And when you see the Nataraja dance, as you said in the Bharatanatyam dance, you feel, or you see the Tandav, you see that energy. There is no more energetic icon in Indian spirituality than Shiva, you know. So when you think of Shiva, he's not destruction. He is rebirth. He is reawakening. He is making you wake up. That's the whole idea of Shiva. So don't look at Shiva and think of destruction of the world. He's not the end of the world, you know. In fact, Vishnu has more to do with the end of the world than Shiva. But the end of the world that is needed for you to wake up, that is Shiva. That is Shiva. Right? And I wanted to come to this. The meditation is Om Namah Shivaya, and we'll do it a little later on, but it is the same as Kundalini. The Namah Shivaya, right, actually correspond to the elements which correspond to Muladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipura, all the chakras in your body also. So when you practice, there is no difference between the Shaivi way of doing it and the Devi way of doing it. There's no difference. And we'll do some energy work later on after we have had. And this is the Linga, and I'll come to this later. I'll talk about this later. Thank you.